Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this panel on photography in the digital era. My name is Tammy Law, and I will be the moderator for today or this evening's panel, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. Next slide, please. Our first presenter is Dr. Ozan Yavuz. Ozan is a photographer and lecturer at Middle East Technical University. His research focuses on in-game photography, artificial intelligence, and visual anthropology. He is currently working on the history and theory of photography in parallel with the local photographic history of Turkey. He is based between Turkey and the United States. Our second speaker is Avishek Ray. Avishek teaches at the National Institute of Technology in Silchar. His research spans mobility, marginality, and cultural historiography. He is the author of The Vagabond in the South Asian Imagination, co-author of Digital Expressions of the Selfie and Temporal Spaces in Calcutta Digital Networks, and editor of Decolonial Travel. He was awarded the Fulbright Nehru Academic and Professional Excellence Fellowship in 2021. Next slide, please. Before we would begin this presentation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work in Mianjin, Brisbane. I recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society and their contributing contributions to creative practice in this country. I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past and present. Next slide, thank you. It is with my pleasure. Today's session examines how digital technologies are reshaping some of the core assumptions of photography and considering the ethical and political implications of shifts in digital technology, authorship, agency, and representation. Our speakers each approach this from different but intersecting perspectives. Ozan will be examining AI-generated photography in Turkey as a form of counter-discourse, exploring the role of anonymity in practices of resistance. Over to you, Ozan.
Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ozan Yavuz from Middle East Technical University, Turkey. Thank you all for being here. So today I would like to talk about how AI-generated photography is emerging as a powerful tool for anonymity and resistance, essentially serving as a form of counter-discourse within a contemporary Turkish context. So specifically, I want to talk about how the appearance of AI-generated images, rather than simply undermining the traditional limits of photography, opens a new space for political and ethical resistance. So I will try to examine how the condition of anonymity, also known as digital responsibility or maybe obligation, can be weaponized within the contemporary socio-political landscape of Turkey to challenge the narratives, dominant narratives, to bypass censorship and create an alternative visual archive. So next slide, please. So as you may know, photography has been grounded in three foundational assumptions: authorship, indexability, and visibility. So under these classical models, a photograph is mostly understood as a direct trace of reality, is really tied to a human operator and rooted firmly in the visible world, capturing what Roland Barthes also says, famously described as the that has been. So, however, nowadays the rise of AI-generated image world dramatically changes the entire tree foundation. Of course, there is also a digital revolution before it. So it gives us, with images that lack a stable author, a direct physical referent, or even a clear origin. So while this shift is frequently criticized as a crisis of truth, authenticity, and accountability, so I take this condition from a different perspective. So rather than treating this deep anonymity as a core weakness, I want to frame it as a productive research problem with a question. So can this space of missing authorship actually function as a generative condition for a new kind of observation? So this is the main question I want to argue. So next slide, please. So this comes with two guiding questions. So the first one, do AI-generated images inherently produce anonymity? And the second one, can anonymity function as a legitimate strategy of political opposition? So to ask these questions, I turn to a specific context from contemporary protest culture in Turkey happened in 2025, still going on. We feel the effects of these protests. Next slide, please. So in recent years, Turkey has experienced increasing restrictions on journalism, visual expression, and political dissent. So a prominent case is the ongoing legal proceedings involving high-profile political figures such as Istanbul Metropolitan Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, which have frequently drawn significant public attention and triggered widespread spread demonstrations. So in such an environment, so visibility becomes incredibly risky because to appear publicly, especially in an unedited visual form, is to expose oneself to extensive surveillance, potential arrest maybe, or severe professional consequences. So this brings us to a critical theoretical paradox. So as Tüfekçi notes, while digital tools empower collective action and create new avenues for political expression outside formal institutions, they simultaneously reshape and amplify the risks that come with it. So under semi-authoritarian systems, this visibility is weaponized. So as Zuboff says, digital platforms aggressively extract and observe user behavior, so turning them spontaneous political participation into trackable data. So this is the risk that we have in such conditions. Next one, please. So within this environment, AI technologies have begun to play a significant role in political communication. So consider the strategic use of synthetic voices and deepfakes avatars by opposition groups and media platforms to avoid media censorship, create speculative political figures, or mimic the voices of targeted leaders recently facing political bans. So what emerges here is not a simple case of digital deception, but an intense transformation in how political messages are produced and circulated. So authorship becomes entirely distributed, fluid, and unstable, reflecting what Michel Foucault described as the changing nature of the author function. So this technological shift shows a new condition for resistance, a disembodied voice, expression without presence, circulation without exposure. So by separating political discourse from the speaker's physical, vulnerable body, the message is allowed to continue and multiply and circulate independently. So in this sense, political counter-discourse is no longer tied to a stable, exposed, or identifiable subject. So instead, it operates within a completely distributed and protected space of the production. Next one. So this changing becomes even more visible when we turn to the level of protest imagery and examine what we may call an AI-assisted protest aesthetic. We may call it as an AI-assisted protest aesthetic. So this aesthetic is naturally decentralized, grassroots, and driven by digitally fluent participants who combine humor, satire, critique, and intense visual experimentation. So in this risky context, So images do not simply represent political conditions. They actively participate in shaping them. So they are not static documents or photographs. They are dynamic actors that circulate and mediate. So this movement agrees with the Rancière notional distribution of the sensible, because Rancière argues that every society is governed by a preset or default map of self-evident facts that determines what is visible, what can be said, and who has the right to speak within a common space. So for Rancière, so politics is not just about state institutions. It's an aesthetic struggle over this very map, a battle over who is allowed into the light of public visibility and who is forced to remain in the shadows. So therefore, when we ask what happens when an image moves in contemporary Turkey, we are asking a structural question. So as these synthetic, anonymous images circulate across digital spaces, their rapid movement acts as literal redistribution. So by introducing alternative visuals into the public sphere, they fracture the dominant regime of perception, actively reframing what a society perceives as common, possible, or true. Next one. So there's a really interesting case happened in Turkey, 2025. Uh, so yeah, this is really short footage from the riots. It seems really funny because Pikachu is running. Uh, a video showing a protester dressed as Pikachu running from the riot police quickly. It goes really viral by 2025. So it looks unreal because there are riots, there are protests, and Pikachu is running. But then something happened, something had changed. Next slide, please. So yeah, it becomes a Pikachu resistance imagery. It began in streets where protests wear a full body Pikachu costume. So initially this made a purely practical function, a tactical mask to escape facial recognition and state surveillance. But the moment that costumed body stepped into the public sphere, it introduced an intense layer of symbolic and affective complexity. It's a body, a hidden body, was instantly replaced by a hyper-visible, globally recognized cultural signifier. Next one. So, as you may know, maybe, Gotta Get 'em All is the iconic English slogan for the Pokemon franchise, originating from the Pokemon theme song. So the last word, catch 'em all, refers to law enforcement because the act of catching belongs to law enforcement. So this AI photo says, where are you to law enforcement? Because Pikachu is here. So here they changed the context of the slogan and developed a counter narrative through the AI photo. So Pikachu is here, where is Ketchum? Oh, I mean, Pikachu is here, where is the law enforcement? They changed the context. Next one. So here we can see different works from different contexts. They have been produced like satirical, cynical, or sarcastic expressions from the people. So following this real world event, the internet took over dozens of AI generated photographs. Photographs began to saturate digital spaces in Turkey, showing Pikachu actively marching in protest, facing lines of riot police, or being detained by security forces. So through AI, a global pop culture icon was renamed or renamed and localized into a figure of the political dissent. Next one. So, but it just didn't stop with Pikachu. So using AI, people started remixing all kind of global pop culture icons, turning characters like Batman, Joker, Superman into symbols of political protests. So When you look at in this way, an AI image isn't just a static picture representing one moment in time. It acts like a highly mobile, fluid symbol that moves through a massive global network connecting protesters and ideas all around the world. Next one. And it went, I mean, here are some examples from other countries. These are actually real physical photographs from videos. They show real people wearing the exact same Pikachu costume like in Turkey, out in the streets at protests worldwide like in Turkey, and reach all over the Turkey suddenly. Next one. So this one, so this case brings us to a core argument of my talk. So anonymity has as an intentional strategy, we may call it. So right now, protesters operate in an environment where sharing political content can lead to arrest, investigation, or professional consequences. So in response, people are turning to clever ways of hiding, using physical masks, costumes, and now AI-generated images. So AI lets people create powerful images that scream dissent without exposing a single real person's face. So when we look at in this way to the case, anonymity isn't a limitation or a crisis of a truth at all. It's actually a protective shield. So by keeping the creator's identity hidden and breaking that direct link to the real world photo, AI images can create what we call a tactical space of resistance. So it allows the political message to travel far and wide with maximum power while keeping the messenger completely safe from the watchful eye of the state. Next one. So to wrap things up as a summary, when we look at intersectional AI protests and visual culture in Turkey today, we're witnessing a fundamental shift. So by functioning as a visual refugee, generative AI does something different and fast. So if we see this AI space with as a visual refugee, so we can look at through its what Derrida, Jacques Derrida called absolute hospitality. So for Derrida, true hospitality means welcoming a guest without ever asking for their name or ID. So, and that's exactly what AI does. It hosts these protest images without demanding to know who created them, and it creates a democratized archive, a place where resistance can live and move without being tracked or categorized by state. So in this sense, AI becomes a sanctuary or a shelter. It's a place where people can express their anger, imagine in a different future, or just vent their feelings directly. So these images aren't trying to prove a fact in court. They're trying to dream up a reality that doesn't exist yet. So Derrida also talked about the importance of the secret. He argued that for democracy to be healthy, there has to be a space the state can't see into or calculate. So that's what we have here, a collective secret. These images are visible everyone in public, but their source is total mystery to the authorities. So they're out in the open, yet completely unreadable to the hierarchy. So ultimately, so anonymity isn't an absence. It's a kind of shield, and in this digital sanctuary or shelter, because the political voice detaches from vulnerable physical body and allowing the imagination of resistance to persist and multiply to help the voices becomes more clear. Uh, thank you for listening to me, and if you have questions, please, very welcome.
Thank you, Ozan. I'm very interested in how we might rethink authorship in AI-generated digital photography. And perhaps we can return to the idea of anonymity what you refer to as a visual refuge or shield, or perhaps people might be interested in further examination in popular culture icons in the imagery during audience and Q&A time after Avishek has spoken. And for those of you tuning in, please note down your questions in the comments sections or hold on to them until Q&A time, and we'll refer to them after Avishek has spoken. So questions around anonymity and absence in AI-generated photography relate to our next presenter, Avishek Ray, who deals with forms of absence, and most notably in the image of an invisible black hole. Avishek brings algorithmic imaging and posthuman ethics into focus, placing algorithmic imaging at the crossroads of aesthetics, knowledge production, and ethics. Please welcome Avishek Ray.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this panel. And I'll take off from Ozan's talk, and I'll briefly talk about authorship and then mount the question onto issues of ethics and so on. So good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are joining. And I would like to discuss a phenomena today that is increasingly central to contemporary visual culture. And this has already been, to a great extent, discussed by my preceding speaker. And this concerns scientific knowledge production, technological mediation, and very broadly, I refer to this as algorithmic imaging, provisionally for the sake of today's discussion. So my title is Algorithmic Imaging and Posthuman Ethics, Rethinking Representation in the Age of Simulation. So we live in a world saturated with images, all kinds of images, social media, phones, otherwise, all kinds of media formats. So traditionally, we have understood images as representations of things, and I am using representation here in the classical Aristotelian sense of the term. Like when I say representation, I'm invoking Aristotle here, like things that used to exist in front of a camera or in front of a painter or an observer, broadly speaking. So even when images were manipulated, they retained some connection to a visible object or an event. However, contemporary computational technologies are transforming this relationship between image and reality. Today, most of influential images we encounter are not simply captured, they are computed. In the sense they are AI generated, they emerge from simulations, algorithms, statistical models, machine learning systems, and massive data sets. These images do not necessarily depict what is directly visible or observable. Instead, they visualize what is inferred, predicted, reconstructed, or imagined through computational processes, oftentimes beyond our understanding or comprehension. Like, for example, I'm going to go into the black hole image in a moment. And can we see the black hole image, please? So this transformation raises profound questions. What exactly are these images representing, if at all they are representing anything? And how do they shape our understanding of reality? And what exactly ethical responsibilities emerge when visual knowledge is generated by algorithms rather than direct observation? So I'm going to touch upon these questions. And as you know, like these are questions to which we do not have ready answers to these questions. So I'll keep this in the back of my mind as I present. And I think these are questions that we need to reflect on as we consider the massive proliferations of AI-generated algorithmic images. So to explore these questions, I'm focusing on this one compelling example of black hole, which you can see on screen. And I'll briefly refer to another image passingly toward the end of the talk. So the image that you see is one of a black hole not captured again, like it's I wouldn't call it captured, like simulated, let's call it simulated in 2019. So this immediately, the image made headlines in 2019 when this image was produced. And I'm using Derrida's concept of trace to rethink the ontology of algorithmic images like this one, and to develop a framework for understanding these kind of images more generally speaking. So let me talk about the image more specifically. So in April 29, the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration released what you were seeing on screen, and this was celebrated worldwide as the first image of black hole. And we have to remember here that black hole, being black hole, is definitionally non-observable. I mean, no one can observe a black hole because it's black hole, because it's black. So it's definitionally non-observable. So the image quickly became iconic, a glowing orange ring surrounded by a dark center. So at first glance, it appears to be a photograph. And of course, there were very funny memes. People made fun of it, that it looks like a pizza, for example. So there was those kind of Instagram memes that immediately popped up. Newspapers described it as a picture. So if you look, go back to 2019 reportages of newspaper, so this was the common trope. They called it a picture. So it's like very counterintuitive use of the term image or picture. Public discourse framed it as a visual proof of Einstein's theories, the time motion kind of continuum. And yet the reality of this production was far more complex and most likely beyond our comprehension. So a black hole, as I said, by definition, cannot be directly seen because it emits no light. What scientists observe are indirect effects, radiation from surrounding matter, gravitational distortions, and radio signals collected across multiple telescopes distributed across the Earth over a very long period of time. So this is to put very simply, so this is almost like a jigsaw puzzle, like people took tiny bits of things here and there and they put them into a jigsaw puzzle into what appears like the image that we see now. So the Event Horizon Telescope did not produce a conventional photograph in that sense. Instead, it generated enormous quantities of fragmented data. That's what I referred to when I called it a jigsaw puzzle, because the available data were incomplete. Researchers had to employ sophisticated reconstruction of algorithms to generate possible visualizations like projections or extrapolations. So these algorithms compared data against numerous image models. Candidate images were repeatedly generated, tested, ranked, modified, selected, and accordingly their statistical consistency was observed as quote-unquote evidence. And of course, there were many of these images that had to be eventually discarded because they didn't fit into the idea of quote-unquote correct projection, so to say. So importantly, the reconstruction process incorporated assumptions derived from previous knowledge and reference data sets. So definitionally, again, this is not an image in that sense. Researchers also tested algorithms using familiar objects and structures to ensure that the system could reliably recover patterns from incomplete information previously observed. And the final image, therefore, was neither purely observed nor purely invented. So this is my argument. So it emerged through a process of computational mediation. So this example illustrates a broader shift in visual culture as a whole. Images increasingly function not as a transparent window into the reality or the world, but as outputs of complex interactions among data, algorithms, models, and human judgments. So the black hole image is just an example which represents a new category of visual object and image produced through simulation and probabilistic inference rather than direct optical interference. So this is my first point that I'm trying to make. So I'm trying to now extrapolate this argument into the realm of what does it mean in terms of representation or simulation. So this development invites us to reconsider the very concept of representation. Again, I'm reminding that I'm using representation in the classical Aristotelian sense of the term. So classical theories of representation assume a relatively stable relationship between an image and a referent, which of course my previous speaker referred to when he discussed indexicality. So a photograph, for example, is often valued because it bears indexical connection to something that physically existed before the camera. So algorithmic images very clearly are disrupting this model. So consider medical imaging technologies, climate simulations, astronomical reconstructions, and AI-generated visualizations. In each sense, the image is assembled from computational operations rather than directly recorded appearances. The image in these cases becomes less a reflection of reality and more a projection generated through calculation/computation. So this does not mean such images are false. On the contrary, many are scientifically rigorous and extraordinarily useful, at least in the knowledge production kind of dome or science technology field. So this doesn't, as I said, this does not mean the images are false. On the contrary, they're scientifically rigorous, extraordinarily useful. However, the truth claims operate on a very different realm. Rather than saying, this is what I seen, they effectively say, this is what the available data and computational models suggest is most likely a true quote-unquote representation. Probability replaces direct visibility here, and inference replaces observation. Simulation supplements representation, and consequently, visual authority increasingly depends on trust in computational processes rather than trust in human perception. So this shift marks a significant moment in history of visuality, or by extension, history of photography. Human vision is no longer the primary source of visual knowledge. Machines now participate actively in determining what can be seen, known, and representation, and what can be definitionally now could be called representation. So this is why I described the contemporary visual culture as increasingly post-human. So that was hinted at when I referred. So I used the term post-human in the title of the talk. And this is broadly a condition, a generative condition that I refer to as post-human visuality. Sorry. The concept of post-humanism challenges the idea that humans occupy the center of knowledge production. This is like a very simple definition. Traditional humanism assumes that humans are autonomous observers who perceive and interpret the world. Post-humanism questions this assumption by emphasizing networks of humans, machines, infrastructures, data systems, and in some cases, often non-human agencies. So algorithmic imaging exemplifies this shift. The black hole image was not produced by a single observer or a single machine for that matter. It emerged from distributed assemblages involving telescopes, computational systems, data sets, mathematical models, scientific institutions, collaborative human expertise, and so on and so forth. And in this framework, vision itself becomes distributed. It's not like a again, like a classical, like an observer-observed kind of binary relationship here. So seeing is no longer an exclusively human activity. That is the point I'm trying to make. And instead, visual knowledge emerges from interactions among humans and other non-human socio-technical systems. So this transformation has important implications. If machines increasingly participate in visualizing reality, then questions of interpretation, responsibility, and ethics become more complex. So I do not have answers to that question, but just for the sake of provoking a discussion, I still ask this question, like, who sees in this case? Who decides what counts as evidence? Who determines what image becomes authoritative? And perhaps most importantly, who is accountable when algorithmically generated images shape public understanding? To address these questions, I turn to Derrida's concept of trace. How am I doing with time? How much time do I have?
Yeah, we've still got plenty of time, Avishek.
Okay, good. So Derrida's concept of trace offers a powerful way to understand these kinds of images. For Derrida, meaning is never fully present. Every sign contains traces of other signs. Presence is always accompanied by absence, and what appears before us is shaped by actually not what is immediately visible to us, but also what is absent. So the trace therefore refers to the residual marks, differences, and absence that make meaning out of an image possible. So although Derrida developed this concept within philosophy and linguistics, I'm borrowing it here in the context of image making because it can also illuminate contemporary understanding of imaging technologies. So consider the black hole image once again. What do we actually see? We do not see the black hole itself. We see a computational reconstruction derived from traces left in observational data over a significant period of time. So the image emerges from signals, absences, statistical probabilities, projections, and algorithmic decisions. Its meanings depends not only on what appears in the image, like not in that box, not in the frame, but also on what remains invisible. Missing data, computational assumptions, images that were actually discarded, reconstruction protocols, and a lot of human and non-human errors for that matter. So the image is therefore constituted by traces. Indeed, one could argue that all algorithmic images are trace structured. So that could be like a very general kind of argument if you want to push this argument to its logical extreme. So they're neither simple representations of reality nor arbitrary fabrication. So this point is well taken. So instead, they are assemblages of traces generated through complex processes of selection, transformation, mediation, and so on and so forth. But viewing algorithmic images through the lens of trace allows us to move beyond the binary opposition between truth and fiction, veracity or falsity. So the crucial question is not whether these images are real or false. Rather, we should ask how traces are assembled, whose traces are included, whose traces are excluded, and what forms of authority emerge from such arrangements. So this perspective shifts our attention from representation to the process itself, from appearance to mediation. So I'll now move on to the ethical question, more generally speaking. So a concept of trace also helps us identify several ethical challenges. The first question I pose is the issue of transparency. Algorithmic images often conceal the processes through which they are produced. And that's what I said that when I showed you the black hole images, I've been reiterating that these are produced through processes which are oftentimes beyond our comprehension. I mean, unless I'm a computer scientist or an imaging technologist, I have no clue whatsoever what went into making the image. So algorithmic images often conceal the processes through which they are produced. For most viewers, the final images appears self-evident, yet the computational operations that generated it remain invisible. So this opacity can create a false sense of certainty. So I know that this is black hole, but I don't know how it was observed. Second, there is the question of accountability. When an image emerges from interactions among data sets, algorithms, institutions, and human operations, responsibility becomes, of course, distributed. Again, like an issue my previous speaker has already touched upon this. If an image misleads audiences or reinforces problematic assumptions, who should be held accountable? The software designer, the scientist, the institution, the data set? I don't know. So the traditional models of responsibility, like a very classical authorship model, would probably struggle to address these questions related to distributed forms of agency. Third, there is also the issue of epistemic authority. Algorithmic images often carry enormous persuasive power because they appear scientific and technologically sophisticated. And partly because I do not understand how this image is created, I tend to assume it to be true. Because I don't understand, I think that there's something must be profound in it. That's a typical human tendency when we deal with incomprehensible or very sophisticated scientific data. So this also has got to do with the ethical challenge of referential selection. So every simulation relies on reference models, training data sets, especially true if you think of large-scale language models in today's context, or prior assumptions. So human choices inevitably influence these selections. Consequently, algorithmic images are never neutral. And this is a given. All of us would probably agree to this. So they reflect decisions about what counts as relevant evidence, what should be emphasized, and what should be excluded. Recognizing these choices is essential for the kind of ethical engagement that I've been talking about, especially when it comes to computational visuality. So in recent years, so can we see the next, it's not an image, it's a newspaper report, but if we just scroll down a little bit and we will stop here at the image, can we see at the, yeah. So this is it. So in recent years, several newspaper reports document cases in which Aadhaar cards, so for those of you who are not familiar, Aadhaar card carries a 12-digit number that you see starting with 5485. So this is an equivalent of the US Social Security number. So it gives you like a 12-digit security number assigned to all legit citizens, and then it is tied with your social security and everything, and you have to produce this to, in most cases, to open a bank account, even in some cases to take a mobile phone SIM card, and so on and so forth. So anyway, long story short, so this is equivalent to US social security number. So as you can see, like one widely circulated case, this was like very early days when the Aadhaar. So Aadhaar is a very new thing in India, by the way. It was rolled out in 2017-18 at around that time, slightly around that time. So I think this image was from 2018 or at around same time. The date is not important, but you see in this widely circulated image, a dog's photograph appearing on the Aadhaar card. So by the way, let me tell you, this is not a meme. This is a real image. Somebody just played a prank and put his pet dog. When the other people came to photograph him, this man just put his pet dog to be photographed, and that's how his pet dog was photographed instead. And the dog even has a name, like a date of birth and so on and so forth. So at first glance, such incidents may appear like merely humorous or a prank or bureaucratic errors, yet they reveal something profound about the nature of contemporary visual authority. Once incorporated into a large digital infrastructure, which in the case of India, it's like the world's largest digital identification system, the image acquires institutional legitimacy. I mean, the image was in circulation, the card was in circulation for a very long time till people found out that this is actually a dog. I mean, so in that sense, this is not a humor or a prank. So once incorporated into these data sets, the image acquires certain value within this data set. The image becomes operationally real because databases, verification systems, and administrative procedures recognize it as quote unquote valid and legit. So what is significant here is that the authority no longer derives solely from visual resemblance, or even the question, can a dog have a Aadhaar card or not? So this is not the question. The image functions because it occupies a position within a computational network of authentication. In other words, the system treats the image as evidence, not because a human observer confirms its accuracy, but because algorithmic and bureaucratic infrastructures have accepted it and assigned a 12-digit number to be it a dog or a human. So from a Derridian perspective, this incident demonstrates the logic of trust. The official identity is not grounded in an original presence. So they don't care whether a human or a dog appears in the card, that can be, and whether the dog can actually avail the social security or not. So this is not the question. So instead, it emerges through a chain of representations, records, and digital traces. When a dog's photograph can temporarily stand in for a human subject within a government database, we see the identity itself is being constituted through systems of mediation rather than through direct visual correspondence. The ethical implications are significant because if algorithms can now confer authority upon obviously incorrect image, then we must ask how visual legitimacy is produced and maintained, and for whom. More importantly, we must question who bears responsibility when computational systems generate, circulate, and authenticate visual representations that we clearly see are incorrect. So the distance between a black hole image and a dog's photograph on an Aadhaar card may seem immense, yet both these cases reveal a common condition of contemporary visuality. In each instance, the image derived their authority not simply from what they depict, but from computational and institutional systems that generate, validate, and circulate them, and within which they find their validity or legitimacy. So one image shapes our understanding of the cosmos, the other image, the administrative norms of everyday identity. Together, they illustrate how visual truths in our times increasingly emerges from networks of data, algorithms, institutions than from our own observation. So to conclude, algorithmic imaging represents a fundamental transformation in that sense, in terms of the relationship between images, knowledge, reality, and so on. So the 2019 black hole image demonstrates how contemporary visualizations increasingly emerge from simulation, inference, and computational mediation. On the other hand, this image represents how certain clearly foundationally incorrect images acquire legitimacy within state bureaucracy, state systems. So such images challenge conventional assumptions about representation in general and invite us to rethink visuality in post-human terms. At the same time, there is urgent ethical questions concerning transparency, accountability, epistemic authority, and first and foremost, responsibility. As computational systems become increasingly central to knowledge production, the challenge before us is not merely to evaluate what algorithmic images show or do, but also to interrogate the processes through which they come into being. I think I'll stop here. Thank you for your patience, and I'll be happy to answer your questions and clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Avishek. That expansion into simulation and algorithmic construction, it does really challenge the very idea of photography as evidence or trace. And I find that the metaphor of the simulation of the black hole image or representation as a jigsaw puzzle very fascinating. We did have a comment from John Goldsmith in the Q&A referring to whether or not photography is defined. He says, if photography is defined as images recorded via a camera, the black hole images are not photographs, they are graphic representations. And in this example, we are talking of images, referring generally to a visual representation. A photograph is an image, but an image is not necessarily a photograph. And photo ethics is part of visual ethics, more broadly, which has been a theme throughout the other panels as well. So thank you for your comment, John. During the last 14 minutes of this session, I'd like to open up the discussion to the audience. So please feel free to direct your question to a particular presenter or to both panelists. And please pop them in the comments section and we can refer them to the particular presenter or panelists. Anyone would like to start us off? Okay, I've got a question. If nobody would like to, in the audience, would like to contribute at this point in time, perhaps people are still percolating ideas. Perhaps, I guess, there are questions of ethical responsibility in both of your presentations. Who is accountable when something goes wrong? Both of you kind of addressed bringing up this question in both circumstances. Do we need to move beyond traditional frameworks like authorship and consent towards a more relational or systemic when we think about photographic ethics? What are your thoughts?
Shall I?
Yes, please, Avishek.
So I think necessarily we are talking about what we can refer to as authorless images in these cases. And I think the whole question of indexicality, as I've hinted at, between the observer and observed, I don't think that kind of a model works in the kind of images that we are discussing. Then I think we need a more generative understanding of what kind of a framework would better explain this scenario. I don't think I have an answer to this, but taking cues from what you are saying, I think that the observer-observed model is not the correct framework for understanding these authorless images.
Thanks, Avishek. Ozan, I guess going...
Yeah, I got a problem with the microphone. Sorry, can you repeat that again, the question, please?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm thinking, do we need to move beyond traditional frameworks like authorship and consent towards something more relational or systemic when we're thinking about photographic ethics?
Yeah, I sometimes think about that because I'm working on AI, some stuff. So I think we need some kind of balance, because if you need to go back, we need to go back and further. And if we go back further, we will go back further again. So it will go on. We can't go back further forever. As a traditional relationship between photography and reality, and dark room techniques, or whatever you say, in terms of indexicality or authorship or other comments. So we need a balance. Always we need a balance, I think, because we are using AI, we're using digital systems, we're going to use new ones for the future. So I think the balance is a word that I want to use. To make the connection between past and future. I know it's a so closed sentences that I am using, but that's the thing that I'm thinking right now.
Thank you both. Zelda in the chat comment, she says, this is a bit off-piste, but I'm interested in how globally the street surveillance cameras are omnipresent and where the majority of these images reside. Who, when, and where are they disposed of? Or are they kept forever? Does A1 have access to these? Or I think AI, I think she...
Yeah.
Would you like
No
to respond?
idea. No idea, honestly.
Perhaps we can move to Attila's
Yeah,
question,
I'm not sure.
which is next. Is AI image generation at an advanced stage of legislative development? Where do these regulatory efforts currently stand? And could we briefly hear about the regulation itself and the broader trends?
I think part of the anxiety arises from the
I
fact
think
that
it's a
there's
kind of
no
question relates to
regulatory
law,
framework.
maybe. I'm not sure because it's, yeah.
Sorry, Ozan, I think Avishek was just
Yeah.
in the
sorry,
middle of responding. Yeah, you feel free to go next after Avishek.
Okay, so I think I've just a short observation. The fact is, I think part of the anxiety emerges from the fact that there's no regulation at the moment because we do not have any definitional understanding of what are these. I think the first person, I forgot his name, I think we have his or her comment in, like Tammy has put it here, like whether can we call these are images or photographs. I think this is a definitional anxiety emerges from the fact that we still don't have an understanding of whether to call these images or photographs and what exactly defines these photographs in the case of AI generated images. I think unless we have that kind of a definitional clarity, the question of regulatory framework doesn't arise at all. I think that's where the whole anxiety comes from.
Ozan, is your microphone okay? Would you like to respond as well?
Yeah, I was saying that I'm not so professional about the question or the level because it's, yeah.
Thank you, Ozan. Are there any other questions from the audience? Would we like to contribute? It's interesting, both of you refer to, anonymity, and Ozan, you particularly speak of this in your paper. In a digital environment where images can circulate widely and rapidly, how do we balance that need for anonymity with the need for accountability?
Yeah, it's a tough question, I guess, because it depends on where you are. I mean, because some countries have some kind of regulation for that, but some countries doesn't have these regulations because of the law. I don't think in Turkey we have kind of regulation for anonymity. I'm not sure because when you create an image with AI or photograph with AI, it's up to the context. So when you post it, you need to be some kind of careful, and then yeah, I think in countries like in Turkey, you have to be some kind of in the middle of the context. I mean, what you're saying, if you are edge of the context, you're maybe under danger because there is a regulation, there is a surveillance, and then rapidly they can catch you. So I mean, it depends on where you are. I mean, if you post an image, the same image in another country, it will affect you in very differently. So it depends on where you are. I mean, yeah.
Thank you, Ozan.
Yeah.
Do either of you have questions for one another, perhaps? In response to one another's papers and research.
So I have a small
Go ahead,
pragmatic question. Yeah, so I have a small pragmatic question, Ozan. So I understand this is a part of your larger research project. So this is not like a one-off kind of thing, right?
I'm sorry, I can't hear Avishek because I'm not sure if there's a problem or.
I'll repeat it. Never mind. So I'm saying, is it a part of your larger research project or is it like a one-off thing? So the reason I'm asking this is, if it is a part of your larger research project, I'm curious to know where exactly are you or will you access your data from? Because these images are also like very dynamic, like the same meme or the same AI generated images, like there are like different versions of it. So how are you accessing them? Like what are your sources? I mean, just in case if it's like a long-term project. I think there's some audibility.
Can you hear me if I ask you this question?
Maybe I'll type the question.
Yeah, sorry everybody. I think we're just having some technical difficulties. Ozan,
I'll type it anyway. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't hear. I can hear Tammy, but I can't hear Avishek.
Okay, so
I'm typing it.
So
Avishek is going to type it for you. But he was asking if he's asking whether or not this is a one-off or if it is a long-term project. And his understanding is it is related to your ongoing research. And he's asking, how are you accessing the images or from where?
Yeah, it's not a long-term project or ongoing project, because when I heard Photography Ethics Symposium, I just made it up. I mean, I was already working on AI. And then when I heard the topic, I found this idea. How am I accessing the images from where? From websites. I mean, they are not banned right now, hopefully. But as far as I know, I have not so much images. I have just maybe 10 or 15 images. Some of them banned from the law enforcement, I guess. Restricted pages, I guess. Yeah, I totally have 10 images or something. And just one footage. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you for sharing, Ozan. We are at the end of this panel, and thank you so much to both Ozan and Avishek. To conclude, this panel has shown that in the digital era, photography is anonymous and collective. It is circulated and repurposed and constructed. These shifts don't just change how images are made, they fundamentally reshape how we understand ethics and responsibility in visual culture. Caroline says, very interesting perspectives. Thank you both. I'd like to. Thank you. I'd like to thank the VII Foundation for hosting the panel, and thanks to Daisy Corbin O'Grady behind the scenes for the technical support. And please join me in thanking our speakers, Dr. Ozan Yavuz and Avishek Ray. And please enjoy the rest of the symposium. And thank you for tuning in to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.